Dive into the atmosphere of the ancient sea, where creatures with segmented bodies and 5 eyes on stalks swam. This was the time of the Cambrian period, which lasted from 538 to 500 million years ago. During this period, an explosion of life forms occurred on Earth, known as the Cambrian explosion. Arthropods, such as trilobites, became the true kings of the ocean depths. These creatures had a chitinous shell that protected their soft bodies and could reach a diameter of up to 30 centimeters. Trilobites, such as the famous olenoids, not only amazed with their appearance, but also with their diverse forms, including flat and convex heads. They inhabited various environments, from shallow waters to deep ocean trenches, allowing them to adapt to conditions that changed every million years. But trilobites are just one example. In the oceans, strange creatures like Anomalocaris swam, which could reach a length of over 1.5 meters and had 2 large tentacles used for catching prey. Its eyes, composed of many facets, allowed it to see in low visibility conditions, creating an effect similar to modern insects. Anomalocaris was a predator. Its powerful jaws could tear apart the soft bodies of other marine inhabitants. This creature was an example of how evolution experimented with various body types, and many of its forms turned out to be evolutionary dead ends because they couldn't adapt to changing environmental conditions. Other unusual arthropods included Marella, which can be found in fossil layers dating back to the Cambrian period. These creatures had long, flat bodies and could reach lengths of up to 70 centimeters. Their unique forms and structure demonstrate how nature can be diverse, but not all these experiments were successful. Many species disappeared without leaving descendants. It was also during this period that the first representatives of modern insects appeared. Strange but effective constructions, such as ediacaran organisms, preceded more complex forms of life, creating a true ecosystem filled with diversity. In the Cambrian Ocean, creatures like Dictyopterus also lived, which had a body resembling a shell and long tentacles used for capturing food. These organisms, known as nekton, fed mainly on microscopic algae and detritus floating in the water. They became part of the food chain, playing an important role in the ecosystems of that time. Numerous fossil finds show that these creatures were widely distributed and had various forms and sizes. No less interesting were other representatives of the Cambrian Sea, such as pentacontophorans with their characteristic forms, which could have up to 20 segments and numerous tentacles used for capturing food. These creatures, which became an important part of the ecosystem, illustrate how exactly during the Cambrian period, evolution created numerous unique forms, each with its own advantages and disadvantages. One of the most unique creatures of this period was Opabinia, which lived in seas around 500 million years ago. It had a long body, 5 eyes, and tentacles used for hunting, creating the impression that this creature had come from a science fiction page. Each of these creatures demonstrated how nature uses diversity of forms as a tool for survival. The Cambrian period was a bright example of evolutionary creativity, when numerous experiments with body structure led to the appearance of unique forms of life. In this Cambrian zoo, both successful and unsuccessful experiments existed, which ultimately formed what we see today. Fossil remains found in places like the Burgess Shale, Canada, demonstrate this incredible diverse world where life was just beginning to explore the ocean depths. The Cambrian explosion of life became the foundation for subsequent epochs, when living organisms became more complex and diverse. Close your eyes and imagine a world where giant dragonflies, the size of a seagull, soar through the sky. These remarkable creatures, known as Meganeura, inhabited Earth during the Carboniferous period, which lasted from 360 to 290 million years ago. The wingspan of a Meganeura could reach 70 centimeters, making them one of the largest insects ever to have lived on the planet. Their long, elegant wings were adorned with intricate patterns that not only added to their beauty, but also aided in flight. Scientists believe that the high oxygen content in the atmosphere of that time, which was around 30%, allowed Meganeura to develop extraordinary strength, enabling them to hover in the air with remarkable ease. In ancient forests composed of giant ferns and conifers, these dragonflies hunted other insects, using their sharp mandibles and exceptional reflexes. Research shows that Meganeura could reach speeds of up to 40 kilometers per hour, making them formidable predators in their ecosystem. They not only hovered like helicopters, but also performed swift maneuvers to catch their prey. In this world, teeming with greenery and life, the buzz of Meganeura wings echoed between tree trunks, creating an atmosphere of primeval forest. Paleontologists like Dr. David Griffiths from the University of California have discovered fossils of Meganeura that reveal their size and anatomy, confirming that they were the largest flying insects of their time. These fossils were found in shales dating back around 300 million years, allowing us to better understand their lifestyle and ecological niches. Alongside Meganeura, smaller insects like dragonflies also flew through the air, creating complex food chains in these ecosystems. Meganeura were not only predators, but also an essential part of the Carboniferous forest ecosystem, where they contributed to plant pollination and maintained the balance of nature. All this paints a vivid picture of the ancient world, where every element of the ecosystem played its role. Meganeura, like other ancient inhabitants of Earth, disappeared due to climate and ecosystem changes, but their legacy lives on in the study of fossils and the understanding of insect evolution. Few people know that the first vertebrates were devoid of jaws and more closely resembled strange alien creatures. These jawless fish, which lived during the Ordovician period, which spanned from 485 to 441 million years ago, were true monsters of the ancient sea. They belonged to the class of jawless fish, among which stand out representatives such as Heterosteus and Mixin. Their round oral openings, resembling suckers, allowed them to suck food like detritus and small algae from the ocean floor. These creatures did not have paired fins, making their movements less agile, but this was sufficient for their time. Their bodies were protected by a shell of bony plates, allowing them to survive in an aggressive environment filled with predators like Anomalocaris. While modern fish have a complex structure and movable jaws, jawless fish remained true to their primitive roots, enabling them to adapt to life in conditions where other organisms were just beginning to develop. These fish could reach lengths of up to 4 feet, and their appearance was far from what we are accustomed to. Smooth bodies without scales and bony shields instead of the usual covering. In this ancient ocean, filled with dangers, jawless fish slowly swam, searching for food, and their existence symbolized the early steps of vertebrate evolution. Their direct ancestors, such as Dunalists, symbolized the beginning of a long path that eventually led to the appearance of mammals, including humans. Undoubtedly, it was creatures like Heterosteus that initiated the evolution that led to the formation of modern ecosystems. These fish served as a link between jawless forms of life and those that later developed into true ocean predators. These primitive creatures continued to inspire awe and fear in other ocean inhabitants, such as trilobites, who were forced to constantly adapt to survive in this harsh world. By the end of the Ordovician period, as life on Earth began to diversify, jawless fish still swam in the oceans, leaving their legacy in the form of the first steps towards the complex ecosystem we know today. Imagine a creature the size of a crocodile, but it is not a reptile. It is a giant salamander known as the Areopagus. These remarkable amphibians, which existed during the Carboniferous period, could reach lengths of up to 2.5 meters and were among the largest predators of their time. Areopaguses had wide, flat heads with large eyes, allowing them to see well in the murky waters of ancient swamps. Their bodies were covered in smooth, moist skin, and their powerful legs with long fingers enabled excellent movement both on land and in water. These creatures led a semi-aquatic lifestyle, preferring to inhabit warm, shallow bodies of water surrounded by dense thickets of giant ferns and horsetails, which dominated the ecosystem at the time. In such conditions, Areopuses hunted their prey. They would sneak up on fish and other small swamp inhabitants, using their camouflage and sudden lunges to catch their victims. It is worth noting that Areopuses were not the only large amphibians of that time. The Carboniferous period also saw the existence of creatures like the metaphorhinch, which could reach lengths of over 2 meters and had a narrower snout, allowing it to hunt smaller prey such as insects and small fish. These predators were part of a complex food chain where each individual played a crucial role in maintaining the ecosystem. Ancient swamps, teeming with life, were true hunting grounds where predators like Areopuses and metaphorhinchs lay in wait for their prey among the roots of plants, diving into dark waters and using their hunting skills. The conditions in which they lived were ideal for their existence. Warm climate, abundant water, and diverse food sources created a unique habitat. These amphibians not only helped control the populations of their prey, but were also a vital link in the ecosystem, maintaining the balance of life in the ancient world. The Carboniferous period, which lasted around 300 million years ago, was a time of flourishing for such creatures as the Areopus, and their adaptation to life in water and on land demonstrates how life on Earth changed and evolved. Areopuses were not the only representatives of their group. There were also other species, such as those of the Diffacanthus genus, which also reached significant sizes and were known for their large heads and long bodies. These features made them formidable predators and enabled them to successfully hunt various animals that inhabited their environment. Over the course of evolution, amphibians adapted to various climatic conditions, and the Carboniferous period was a significant stage in their development. It is astonishing, but the coal that warms our homes is the remnants of ancient forests that are over 300 million years old. During the Carboniferous period, which lasted from 360 to 290 million years ago, the Earth looked completely different. At that time, the planet was dominated by vast tropical swamps where giant ferns, horsetails, and tree-like plants grew, reaching heights of up to 30 meters. These forests formed dense thickets where vegetation accumulated in enormous quantities. However, the decomposition process was significantly slowed down due to the absence of effective decomposers like modern fungi and bacteria that break down organic matter. As a result, when plants fell and died, their remains settled at the bottom of the swamps, forming thick layers of plant material known as peat. This peat gradually accumulated, creating conditions for further transformation under the influence of pressure and temperature. Over millions of years, under the weight of new layers of vegetation, the lower layers of peat were compressed, and this process led to the formation of coal. The process was slow and majestic. Pressure reached several hundred atmospheres, and temperature fluctuated between 100 and 300 degrees Celsius. Initially, peat turned into brown coal, and then, under increasing pressure, it transformed into bituminous coal, which we know today. As a result of this process, in some places, coal seams can reach a thickness of up to 100 meters. It is important to note that due to volcanic activity and geological changes, some of these coal layers were brought to the surface, making them accessible for mining. Thus, today, we can use coal that originated from ancient ecosystems that existed during the Carboniferous period. Coal fields, such as the Pittsburgh Coal Basin in the United States, contain billions of tons of coal that has been used for energy production and has been the foundation of the Industrial Revolution. Have you ever wondered what the first reptiles on Earth looked like? These creatures, such as Hylonomus, Gylon, appeared around 300 million years ago at the end of the Carboniferous and the beginning of the Permian period. Gylon was a small reptile, reaching a length of only half a meter and weighing around 500 grams. It had scaly skin, which allowed it to effectively retain moisture and protect itself from predators. This was a significant evolutionary breakthrough, because such adaptations allowed it to conquer new ecological niches and survive in conditions where the air became less humid. By the time guylons began to colonize the land, they already possessed amniotic eggs, which allowed them to reproduce away from water bodies. These eggs, covered with a hard shell, provided protection for the embryo from drying out and predators, which was critically important for survival on land. Guylons and other early reptiles, such as diapsids and synapsids, were foundational species that paved the way for further diversification of reptiles. This group of reptiles became the ancestors of modern lizards, snakes, and turtles. Unlike amphibians, which remained dependent on water for reproduction, guylons were able to conquer new ecosystems, opening the door for further spread of vertebrates across the planet. The abundance of resources on land, such as plants and insects, created ideal conditions for their development. As a result of these evolutionary changes, reptiles became the dominant group of animals on Earth for millions of years. These events occurred against the backdrop of climate change, as Earth experienced sharp temperature fluctuations, which further facilitated the adaptation of these early reptiles to new conditions. Guylons and their kin became symbols of successful land colonization and demonstrated how evolution can radically change life on the planet. The size of the first reptiles was small, but their impact on ecosystems was enormous. They began to occupy ecological niches previously available only to amphibians, thus significantly influencing biodynamics, which shaped the ecosystems of that time. Ultimately, it was these early reptiles that formed the basis for the appearance of dinosaurs and other large animals, which completely changed the face of Earth. Guylons, as pioneers, played a key role in this great evolutionary history, which continues to this day. When the world was different, there were corals that built reefs as tall as skyscrapers. Among the most remarkable representatives of Paleozoic coral reefs were rugose and tabulate corals, which dominated marine ecosystems more than 300 million years ago. Rugose corals, also known as tree corals, had cylindrical stems reaching up to 2 meters in height and formed complex structures resembling underwater forests. Their unique ability to form multi-layered colonies allowed them to create extensive reefs that could stretch for tens of kilometers. Tabulate corals, on the other hand, had thin, plate-like forms and actively participated in reef construction, creating intricate frameworks that served as shelter for numerous marine inhabitants. These corals inhabited warm, shallow seas and created true underwater cities where life thrived at every level. Reefs built by rugose and tabulate corals provided not only refuge for fish, mollusks, and other aquatic creatures, but also supported the diversity of ecosystems that were crucial for the biosphere of that time. For instance, in the vicinity of such reefs, numerous fossil remains of various marine organisms, from brachiopods to starfish, were found, indicating a high level of biological diversity. These reefs not only provided food and shelter, but also played a crucial role in maintaining ecological balance, fostering the prosperity of various species. From time to time, these massive reefs were destroyed by natural disasters, but thanks to the corals' ability to regenerate, they could recover and continue their existence. Rugose and tabulate corals became extinct around 250 million years ago during the largest mass extinction event, but their traces can still be found in geological layers where their fossils remain, reminding us of their once significant impact on marine ecosystems. The height of these reefs reached up to 50 meters, making them true giants of the underwater world. Paradoxically, the first fish did not have jaws or paired fins and more closely resembled strange floating tubes. These jawless creatures, known as agnathans, appeared around 500 million years ago at the beginning of the Cambrian period. Their bodies had an elongated, cylindrical shape, lacking any distinctive features of modern fish. These primitive vertebrates, such as myomeres, did not have jaws for capturing food. Instead, they evolved to filter microscopic organisms from the water. Their skin was covered in smooth mucus, allowing them to move more easily in the water environment filled with small particles and plankton. At that time, the oceans were teeming with life, but they were also dangerous, and these fish adapted to the conditions in which they had to live. Their filtering method of feeding allowed them to obtain food from the water by passing it through special openings on the sides of their bodies. One of the most well-known representatives of agnathans is the lamprey, which existed during that time, but their ancestors were even more primitive. They could reach lengths of up to 1.5 meters and inhabited shallow waters where there was plenty of plankton. These creatures did not have paired fins, which limited their maneuverability, but their body shape allowed them to move effectively in the water. While more complex organisms were just beginning to develop, agnathans represented an important step in the evolution of vertebrates. They did not have jaws, but their existence laid the foundation for future changes. The water they inhabited was rich in oxygen, which facilitated further development of life. These fish could exist in conditions where life was just beginning to colonize the oceans, and their primitive structure became the basis for all subsequent fish that developed later. Around the end of the Silurian period, about 400 million years ago, some of their descendants began to develop jaws, which opened new horizons in feeding and hunting. These changes revolutionized the aquatic ecosystem, where agnathans gave way to more complex forms of life. The primitive structures they used for filtration eventually evolved into more complex systems, providing the diversity of forms and ways of existence that we observe today. The puzzle lies in the fact that scientists still debate why certain groups of animals survived catastrophic extinctions, while others disappeared forever. For instance, during the Permian extinction, which occurred around 250 million years ago and was the most catastrophic in Earth's history, only some species managed to survive. Among them, the ancestors of modern reptiles stand out, possessing unique adaptations. Some of these organisms, such as the ancestors of lizards, developed the ability to hibernate, allowing them to endure unfavorable conditions when temperatures dropped and food became scarce. Hibernation helped them slow down their metabolism and conserve energy, which was crucial in the face of severe resource shortages. Additionally, the surviving species were omnivorous, which provided flexibility in their diet and allowed them to use any available food sources, from vegetation to carrion. This trait gave them an advantage in conditions where ecosystems were destroyed and familiar food sources were depleted. It is also noteworthy that some of these organisms exhibited remarkable tolerance to low oxygen levels, which became critically important when Earth's atmosphere changed and oxygen levels dropped sharply. These adaptations allowed them not only to survive, but also to initiate a new evolutionary line in the conditions of a nearly empty planet, transformed into a post-apocalyptic world. The surrounding environment was full of dangers, but only a few surviving organisms began to repopulate the abandoned ecosystems. An example of this is the group of theropods, the ancestors of modern birds, which became active predators, using their sharp teeth and swift legs for hunting. They were able to adapt to new conditions, unlike other species that could not cope with the changes in the ecosystem. These theropods began to occupy new niches, developing various hunting strategies. Meanwhile, primitive mammals that also survived this extinction began to develop, using the opportunity to hide in burrows and underground shelters, which provided protection from predators and adverse external conditions. This was a period when life on the planet began to regain diversity, gradually filling the voids left by the extinct species. As ecosystems recovered, new plant species appeared, which in turn drove the evolution of new life forms. With each new generation, the surviving organisms adapted to the changes in their environment, creating unique ecosystems that would continue to develop and become increasingly complex. Thus, having passed through a catastrophe, life on the planet found ways to adapt and continue its evolutionary path. It is interesting that just a few million years after this event, dinosaurs appeared on Earth, becoming the dominant group of animals in the Mesozoic era. In ancient times, there existed forests unlike any we know today, devoid of any flowers or trees as we understand them. These coal forests, flourishing around 300 million years ago, were inhabited by giant horsetails, ferns, and lycopods reaching heights of up to 30 meters. The humid, greenhouse-like atmosphere allowed plants to grow to extraordinary sizes. A horsetail, resembling a modern-day horsetail, could reach a diameter of more than half a meter and form dense thickets, providing an ideal habitat for ancient insects. The earth was covered in a layer of decaying vegetation, giving off a characteristic smell of decay, mixed with the aroma of resin from conifers that had not yet evolved into flowering plants. The sound produced by giant insects, such as meganeurids, filled the air, creating a unique soundscape of this mysterious world. Each step through such a forest sounded like a soft crunch underfoot, due to the multitude of decaying leaves and stems. Ancient ferns with their large, feathery leaves created a dense canopy that shielded from sunlight and created perpetual twilight. These forests were not only homes to extraordinary organisms, but also vital sources of oxygen, raising the oxygen levels in the atmosphere to record highs of around 30%. It was during this time that life on Earth made a significant leap forward, with the formation of coal deposits that we now extract from the Earth. These forests contributed to the creation of vast coal reserves that became the foundation of the Industrial Revolution. Giant horsetails, growing up to 7 meters tall, formed dense thickets that could block out light and create unique conditions for the existence of numerous species. Life thrived in these forests, and each creature, whether an insect or a millipede, played its role in the ecosystem. Studying the fossilized remains of these plants and animals helps us understand what life on Earth was like during the Carboniferous period and why this period was a turning point in evolution. For example, the discovery of fossilized fern spores indicates that these plants spread over vast distances, colonizing new territories. The height of the trees, the absence of flowering plants, and the wet climate creating a greenhouse effect formed a unique ecosystem that differed significantly from the present day. Around 100 million years later, when flowering plants such as roses and lilies appeared on Earth, these forests became a thing of the past, but their influence is still felt today through the coal reserves we use for energy production. It may come as a surprise that the first forests not only transformed the planet's appearance, but also triggered global cooling. Approximately 300 million years ago, at the end of the Carbon period, as forests began to spread actively on Earth, the overall concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere reached around 3,000 parts per million, contributing to a warm climate and a high level of greenhouse effect. However, with the appearance of woody plants such as primary conifers and ferns, a process began that significantly altered the atmospheric balance. Trees, absorbing carbon dioxide through photosynthesis, became one of the main factors in reducing its concentration. This process depended on the size and number of trees, which, becoming larger and more numerous, began to actively capture carbon dioxide, thereby reducing the greenhouse effect. Tree roots not only provided soil stability, but also accelerated the weathering of rocks, releasing minerals and contributing to the formation of humus, which also bound carbon in the soil. Studies show that during this period, the level of carbon dioxide decreased to 800 parts per million, leading to a significant change in climate. This process resulted in cooler and drier conditions, which, in turn, opened up new ecological niches for biodiversity. With the appearance of forests, new microclimates formed, which facilitated the development of various plant and animal species. For example, the appearance of mosses and lichens, which could survive in conditions of high humidity, also contributed to carbon retention. Trees began to form complex ecosystems in which the interaction between plants, soil, and atmosphere became more actively shaping climatic conditions. As a result, around 200 million years ago, during the Jurassic period, the level of carbon dioxide continued to decrease, and the Earth's temperature fell, creating conditions for the appearance of the first mammals and birds. The appearance of forests also contributed to the change in soil structure, as decaying leaves and wood enriched it with organic matter, increasing its ability to retain water and carbon. Studies show that during this period, approximately 50% of the carbon in the atmosphere was bound in soils, playing a key role in maintaining the ecological balance. Forests became not just a collection of trees, but complex systems that had a significant impact on the Earth's climate, and their influence was felt over millions of years. In a mysterious manner, around 440 million years ago, more than 85% of all marine species disappeared, and scientists still debate the causes. This event, known as the Ordovician-Silurian extinction, was the first of 5 mass extinctions in Earth's history. It occurred in 2 stages, the first around 440 million years ago, and the second approximately a million years later. The scale of the catastrophe was immense. Not only did trilobites perish, but also many marine invertebrates, including brachiopods and corals, which formed the basis of marine ecosystems at the time. Numerous studies indicate that one of the main factors leading to this extinction was global glaciation, which caused abrupt changes in climatic conditions. Around 200 million years ago, sea levels dropped sharply, leading to the disappearance of coastal ecosystems and disruption of the usual habitats for many marine organisms. Species that depended on stable conditions, such as sea urchins and various mollusks, were particularly hard hit. Changes in water temperature and oxygen levels in the oceans played a crucial role in ecosystems that had evolved over millions of years in stable conditions. Mollusks, which were the main inhabitants of the deep sea at the time, could not adapt to the rapidly changing conditions, leading to mass extinctions. Simultaneously, tectonic processes were occurring on the planet, altering continents, creating new ones and destroying old ones, adding additional pressure on marine ecosystems. Changes in the composition of the atmosphere, caused by volcanic activity, could have led to oxygen deficiency in water, which was detrimental to many marine inhabitants. As a result of this cataclysm, which lasted for hundreds of thousands of years, marine life changed forever. Ultimately, the Ordovician-Silurian extinction opened up new ecological niches, allowing other species such as fish and marine reptiles to occupy the vacated spaces and evolve in conditions that were radically different from the previous ones. This mass extinction marked the beginning of new evolutionary cycles, altering the course of life on the planet. Research shows that it was during this period that active radiation of fish began, which in turn became dominant in marine ecosystems for the next million years. Did you know that once, on Earth, there existed trilobites, creatures whose fossilized remains are today valued by collectors as works of art? These ancient arthropods lived on our planet more than 500 million years ago during the Cambrian period and persisted until the end of the Permian period, about 250 million years ago. Trilobites had a unique 3-lobed body structure consisting of a central lobe and 2 lateral lobes, which allowed them to adapt to various conditions of the marine environment. This body structure not only facilitated their movement in water, but also protected them from predators. They were covered in a hard exoskeleton that protected them from mechanical damage and provided necessary support. One of the most striking features of trilobites is their complex faceted eyes, which consisted of numerous individual lenses. These eyes had the ability to see in a wide range, allowing trilobites to effectively hunt and avoid dangers in the turbulent aquatic environment. Moreover, some species could curl into a ball, which likely served as a defensive reaction to threats. This behavior enabled trilobites to survive in conditions where predators were active. The ancient seabed where they lived was teeming with life. From fearsome predatory conodonts to peaceful mollusks, creating a unique ecosystem at the dawn of life on Earth. Scientific research conducted in recent decades has shown that trilobites were among the most successful organisms of their time. For example, in China, fossils of trilobites have been found that preserve details of soft tissues, providing scientists with a unique opportunity to study their biology. The diversity of trilobites is astonishing. Today, scientists have identified more than 7,000 species, making them one of the most studied classes of fossilized organisms. These creatures not only adapted well to their environment, but also occupied various ecological niches, from plankton to large predators. Their fossils are still found on all continents, including Antarctica, indicating the wide geographical distribution of these organisms. The height of some trilobites reached more than 30 centimeters, making them impressive compared to modern marine creatures. Trilobites became important indicators for geologists, as their fossil finds help determine the age of sedimentary rock layers. It is interesting that trilobites disappeared as a result of the mass extinction at the end of the Permian period, when almost 95% of all species on Earth were wiped out. These fossils not only provide insights into the ancient ecosystem, but also serve as a reminder of how much our world has changed over billions of years. Allow yourself to immerse in a world where the music of life first resonated, the buzzing of insects and the songs of the first terrestrial vertebrates. The acoustic communication of land animals of the Paleozoic began to develop around 300 million years ago as the first vertebrates began to actively inhabit Earth. The first stridulating insects, such as the ancestors of modern grasshoppers and crickets, appeared in the late Devonian, leaving their traces in fossil remains dated to around 300 million years ago. These insects used sound signals to attract mates and defend their territory, which became a significant evolutionary advantage. Studies show that sound communication allowed them not only to find their own kind, but also to warn about predators, significantly increasing their chances of survival. Meanwhile, among amphibians, such as the first frogs, vocal signals developed that served for communication in the growing diversity of ecosystems. These animals could produce sounds to mark their territory or attract females, which is also confirmed by fossil finds where traces of vocal organs adapted for creating sound signals were discovered. The appearance of sound communication led to a true revolution among terrestrial animals, filling the atmosphere of new continents with the sounds of life that had no predecessors. At this time, not only the sounds, but also their meanings began to evolve, creating complex communication systems that became the basis for future ecosystems. The sound signals emitted by the first terrestrial animals can be compared to a symphony, where each sound has its place and meaning, filling the world with new dynamics. Scientists such as paleontologist Dr. Elizabeth Nail assert that sound communication was the catalyst for the further evolution of complex social structures and behavior among terrestrial animals. This was an era when, alongside the development of visual signals such as color and size, sound communication became an important tool for social interaction. The sky and earth were filled with sound waves that changed not only the animals, but also their environment. The distinctive feature of this time was that sound communication provided more complex social bonds, allowing animals not only to survive, but also to develop in new conditions. In this period, the sounds produced by the first vertebrates began to form ecosystems where each note, each buzz and cry had its meaning. This led to the creation of a unique musical symphony that became the basis for future biological interactions and evolutionary changes. The development of sound communication among terrestrial animals of the Paleozoic is not just an interesting fact, but a key moment in the history of life on Earth, when the silence of the continents was broken by the melodies of life that continue to sound today. The first sounds that echoed through forests and fields were not just noise, but signals of life, allowing the construction of new social structures that became the basis for the complex ecosystems we see today. Remarkably, Before the rise of sharks, armored fish, resembling underwater tanks, dominated the seas. These extraordinary creatures, known as placoderms, inhabited the oceans during the Devonian period, which lasted from approximately 411 to 360 million years ago. Placoderms were distinguished by their unique structure. Their bodies were covered in a massive bony armor that protected them from predators and gave them a formidable appearance. The most famous representative of this class was Dunkleosteus, which could reach lengths of over 8 meters and possessed powerful jaws with sharp teeth capable of tearing the flesh of its prey. These fish had primitive jaws that did not resemble the modern teeth of fish, but were well adapted for catching and consuming other marine creatures. In the ancient sea where placoderms reigned, a diverse array of organisms thrived, including Paleozoic mollusks and other fish, making their survival and hunting particularly intriguing. Placoderms were true predators of their time, their powerful bodies and sharp jaws allowing them to hunt smaller fish and invertebrates, thereby ensuring the dominance of their ancestors, the sharks, in marine ecosystems. These creatures could reach speeds of up to 10 kilometers per hour, making them formidable hunters. Their armor consisted of hard bony plates, which allowed them to effectively defend themselves against enemies while also attacking their prey. Placoderms exhibited a wide range of forms and sizes, from Dunkleosteus to smaller representatives like Cocosteus, which did not exceed 1 meter in length. These fish went extinct around 36 million years ago, but their fossils are still found in various places, such as the well-known deposits in the USA and Europe, providing us with insight into what ancient oceans looked like. Placoderms, with their unique adaptations and forms, became an important part of the evolution of vertebrates, and their legacy continues to be relevant for the study of biological history. A significant aspect of their lives was that they were the predecessors of more modern predatory fish, such as sharks, which began to dominate marine waters later, around 300 million years ago. Placoderms played a key role in shaping marine ecosystems, and their survival in the face of competition with other marine creatures illustrates how life on the planet adapted to changes in the environment. Interestingly, their armor served not only as protection, but also for buoyancy in water, giving them an advantage in hunting. In this ancient underwater world, armored fish were indeed like living tanks, attacking with their physical advantages. Imagine for a moment a creature with 5 eyes and a proboscis for sucking up prey. This is an Opabinia, one of the most peculiar inhabitants of the early Cambrian period, which lived around 500 million years ago on territories that are now part of Canada. Opabinia, reaching lengths of up to 25 centimeters, had a unique body shape resembling an elongated droplet, which allowed it to freely move through ancient seas. Its anatomy is astonishing. 5 eyes were located on stalks, providing a wide field of vision, making this creature particularly attentive to potential threats in its environment. These eyes may have been an evolutionary response to the need to see in murky water, where Opabinia lived. The proboscis of Opabinia was not just a tool, but a true vacuum cleaner that allowed it to suck in small invertebrates, such as trilobites and other marine organisms. At the end of the proboscis was a claw, which was likely used for capturing prey or maneuvering in the water. This anatomical feature made Opabinia an efficient predator despite its strange appearance. The creature inhabited warm, shallow waters of the ocean, where among coral reefs and seaweeds, there was an incredible diversity of life forms. Opabinia was part of a community of creatures that, like it, had unique adaptations to their environment. The ocean of that time was full of surreal forms of life, from giant mollusks to tiny plankton. Studying the fossilized remains of Opabinia, scientists such as Dr. Peter van der Waal from the University of British Columbia have concluded that this creature played a significant role in the evolution of predators that developed in a competitive environment. Opabinia is also notable for being found in layers rich in fossils of other early organisms, providing insight into the diversity of life at that time. In geological layers dating back to the Cambrian period, archaeologists have found numerous specimens, allowing them to reconstruct the ecosystem in which Opabinia lived. These findings have made an important contribution to understanding biological evolution and adaptation to changing environmental conditions. Among Opabinia's contemporaries, one can highlight inhabitants such as worm-like creatures and various trilobite species, which also demonstrated their unique adaptations. These creatures filled the ocean, which was teeming with life, but also served as a stage for a brutal struggle for survival. Opabinia, with its 5 eyes and proboscis, was a symbol of that extraordinary evolutionary history that unfolded in the oceans of Earth. These creatures lived in a world where the laws of nature were just beginning to take shape, and their existence was the first page in the book of the evolution of multicellular organisms. Opabinia, like its kin, left clear traces in the fossil record, which continue to interest scientists to this day. Amazingly, but true, long before dinosaurs, there existed reptiles that were almost indistinguishable from modern mammals. These remarkable creatures, known as therapsids, appeared in the Permian period, around 250 million years ago. Therapsids were the ancestors of mammals and possessed a range of unique features that set them apart from typical reptiles of their time. One of the most striking features of therapsids was their differentiated teeth, which allowed them to adapt to a varied diet, including both plant and animal food. This distinguished them from their reptilian predecessors, whose teeth were more uniform and specialized for specific functions. Some research suggests that therapsids could have been warm-blooded animals, meaning they could maintain a constant body temperature, enabling an active lifestyle in conditions where Earth's climate was changing. There is also evidence of hair in some therapsid species, which is a crucial sign of the transition to mammals. These hairs may have served a thermoregulatory function, allowing therapsids to survive in diverse climatic conditions, from hot deserts to cooler regions. Over time, the boundary between reptiles and mammals became increasingly blurred, and therapsids played a significant role in this transition. Even species like the Demetradon, although not therapsids, illustrate this evolutionary diversity, showing how various traits could develop simultaneously. Studies conducted in the 20th century revealed that therapsids had a complex jaw structure, which allowed them to chew food more effectively than their reptilian ancestors. This indicates that therapsids did not merely exist, they adapted and evolved, paving the way for the first mammals. For example, finds from South Africa and Russia, dating back to the Permian period, reveal characteristics typical of late therapsids. There is also a theory that therapsids could develop various hunting strategies, using their sharp teeth as weapons. As a result of such adaptations, some therapsids became predators, while others developed herbivorous habits. Thus, therapsids represent a remarkable example of how animals can change and adapt to changing environmental conditions. A significant discovery was that some therapsids, such as dicynodonts, had wide jaws that allowed them to chew hard plants, highlighting their diverse dietary habits. Findings made at the end of the 20th century also showed that therapsids could have had hair or its precursors, indicating early stages of the development of fur in mammals. Therapsids, therefore, filled an evolutionary niche, foreshadowing the appearance of mammals and creating a foundation for further evolutionary pathways that form the basis for our understanding of mammals today. Long ago, when there were no flowers on Earth, the landscapes were adorned by strange plants with seeds, but no flowers. These first seed-bearing plants, which appeared in the late Paleozoic era, around 300 million years ago, became the predecessors of modern conifers. One of the most famous representatives of this group is the cycad family, which belongs to the class of seed-bearing plants. Their structure was adapted to the conditions of the dominant wet tropical forests. Unlike spore-bearing plants, seed-bearing plants developed seeds that provided protection and nutrients for the embryos, facilitating more successful reproduction in various climatic conditions. Seeds were formed in cones, protecting the embryos from unfavorable environmental factors. This evolution allowed seed-bearing plants to occupy niches that were previously inaccessible to spore-bearing plants, which required water for fertilization. The direct trunks of cycads could reach heights of up to 30 meters, creating majestic forests where the scent of resin mixed with the humid air. The leaves of these trees were hard and needle-like, allowing them to effectively retain moisture in the hot climate. In such forests, there was an atmosphere of antiquity. Soft light pierced through the dense foliage, and the wind created a melodic rustling, as if nature itself whispered about its ancient secrets. Seed-bearing plants not only changed the appearance of the planet, but also became the basis for the formation of ecosystems in which mammals and birds later settled. These trees provided shelter and food for many animal species, contributing to the development of diverse forms of life. An example of this is the finds in Silesia, where the remains of ancient forests with cycads were discovered, estimated to be over 300 million years old. During their heyday, the climate on Earth was significantly warmer than it is today, which facilitated the active growth and spread of these plants. The appearance of seed-bearing plants marked the transition to a new stage in the evolution of plants, opening the door for the emergence of flowering plants in the future. In such conditions, life could develop and adapt, creating a solid foundation for further evolution of flora and fauna on the planet. These ancient forests, full of life, became pioneers who paved the way for more complex ecosystems. Scientific research conducted in recent decades shows that it was precisely the seed-bearing plants that played a key role in changing the composition of the atmosphere, increasing the amount of oxygen, and contributing to the formation of the ozone layer, which protects life on Earth from ultraviolet radiation. Do you know that life on Earth has experienced several global apocalypses? The Paleozoic era, spanning from approximately 600 million to 250 million years ago, is one of the most dramatic periods in the history of our planet. During this time, several mass extinctions occurred, significantly altering the face of life on Earth. The most notable of these is the Permian extinction, which took place around 250 million years ago. This event was the largest mass extinction in history, with about 90% of all marine organisms and 75% of terrestrial species disappearing. The first wave of extinctions began at the end of the Ordovician period, around 440 million years ago, likely due to global cooling and subsequent sea level changes. This was followed by the extinction in the Silurian period, when around 70% of marine species were wiped out, possibly due to volcanic activity and changes in ocean chemistry. Mass extinctions continued into the Devonian period, with about 80% of species disappearing, and many scientists attribute this to climate changes and a decrease in oxygen levels in the oceans. Thus, the Paleozoic era was a harsh battleground for survival, where each extinction opened the door for new forms of life to occupy the vacated niches. During this time, Earth experienced incredible evolutionary changes. The first vertebrates appeared, and ancient plants began to colonize land. Around 400 million years ago, in the Devonian period, sharks and bony fish began to dominate marine ecosystems. Ancient amphibians, such as dark-colored tetrapods, began their experiments with terrestrial life, laying the foundation for future reptiles and mammals. At this time, primitive forests began to form on land, consisting of giant ferns and conifers, which eventually became the coal deposits we know today. These forests not only provided homes for numerous new species, but also altered Earth's atmosphere, increasing oxygen levels to a level favorable for the emergence of more complex life forms. However, despite these evolutionary achievements, life on Earth remained vulnerable to catastrophic changes such as volcanic eruptions, climate changes, and meteorite impacts. The Paleozoic era is not just an era of ancient creatures, it is an era that laid the foundations for all future life on the planet. As a result of the long-term interaction between species, the environment, and climate, life on Earth has transformed, but each new formation carries the shadow of previous catastrophes. The first half of the Paleozoic era was a time when life was just beginning to adapt to land, and its successes were always at risk. It is important to understand that behind the apparent simplicity of these changes stood millions of years of evolution and complex interactions within ecosystems. The Paleozoic era left us not only a rich heritage of fossils, but also lessons about the fragility of life, which can be subject to catastrophic changes at any moment. In this context, it is worth mentioning that the most famous fossil find from the Paleozoic period is the fossilized remains of trilobites, which are a symbol of that era when life was just beginning to develop in its earliest forms. Trilobites appeared around 500 million years ago and went extinct at the end of the Permian period, leaving behind a rich fossil heritage that is still studied by scientists worldwide. Over just a few hundred million years, evolution led to the emergence and extinction of countless species, and this process will not stop as long as life exists on our planet. Imagine a world without a single tree or blade of grass, where the land is a lifeless desert. At the beginning of the Cambrian period, which started around 548 million years ago, life mainly existed in the oceans, and the continents looked completely different from today. On land, there was absolute peace, and the lifeless rocks and sandy plains stretched for thousands of kilometers, devoid of any hint of vegetation. The Cambrian period was a time of great changes, when the oceans teemed with a multitude of life forms that literally bubbled with diversity. In these ancient seas, there were the first multicellular organisms, such as trilobites, sea lilies, and various types of worms. For example, trilobites, which appeared around 500 million years ago, became one of the most distinctive symbols of this time. These marine creatures had a hard exoskeleton and could reach sizes up to 20 centimeters, with their diverse shapes and sizes, allowing them to occupy various ecological niches. Against the backdrop of the dead continents in the oceans, true revolutions took place when new species emerged that later became the basis of future ecosystems. It is interesting that it was during this period that the Cambrian explosion occurred, a phenomenon where, over a relatively short period of about 10 million years, more than 50 new classes of organisms appeared. This was akin to an alien birth of life, where the diversity of forms and functions would have amazed any observer. The oceans were filled with large and small creatures that used various strategies for survival. Some were predators, others were filter feeders, collecting the smallest food particles from the water. The Cambrian period laid the foundation for further evolution and the formation of ecosystems that we know today. At this time, life was just beginning to explore its first territories, and the ocean became the home for many organisms that would later move onto land. The lifeless continents, devoid of vegetation, contrasted with the teeming life in the ancient seas, where incredible changes and formations were taking place. The Cambrian period was a significant milestone in the history of Earth, opening the way to further development of complex ecosystems that ultimately led to the appearance of dinosaurs and, later, mammals. As a result of these processes, life on the planet began to develop in an endless variety of directions, from simple organisms to complex forms that we observe today. In the era when reptiles were just beginning to dominate, there lived an extraordinary predator with a sail on its back. Demetradon was not a dinosaur, but a pelycosaur that inhabited Earth around 300 million years ago, during the Permian period. Demetradon could reach lengths of up to 4 meters and weigh more than 400 kilograms. Its skull had a distinctive shape with powerful jaws equipped with sharp teeth, perfectly suited for tearing flesh. The sail on its back, composed of bony plates connected by skin, could reach heights of up to 1 meter and served multiple purposes. Firstly, it helped with thermoregulation, allowing Demetradon to heat up quickly in the sun or cool down in the shade. This was crucial in the Permian climate, where temperatures could fluctuate significantly throughout the day. Secondly, the sail could be used for display to other individuals, playing a significant role in mating behavior and territorial aggression. Demetradon was an active predator, hunting fish and other animals using its speed and agility. It inhabited diverse ecosystems, including wet forests and marshy areas where it found ample food. This creature occupied the top of the food chain of its time, and its predatory skills allowed it to effectively hunt smaller reptiles and amphibians. Compared to modern predators, Demetradon was somewhat like a predecessor to crocodiles, sharing similar hunting instincts. Its powerful limbs, ending in sharp claws, allowed it to confidently move on land and attack prey, while the sail on its back added to its imposing presence in the eyes of competitors. An important aspect of its lifestyle was that it was ectothermic, meaning its body temperature depended on the environment, making it vulnerable in cold periods. Demetradon was one of the first large predators in Earth's history and left its mark in fossil finds discovered in the early 20th century in the United States, particularly in Texas and New Mexico. These finds, including remains of its spine and skull, helped scientists reconstruct the appearance of this remarkable creature and understand its role in the ecosystems that existed during the Permian period. The existence of Demetradon also helped scientists better understand the evolution of warm-blooded animals, as its characteristics indicate transitional stages between ectothermic and endothermic organisms. Imagine a sea teeming with creatures resembling giant sea scorpions, the size of humans. These unique predators, known as Eurypterids, emerged during the Silurian period, which spanned from 438 to 420 million years ago. Eurypterids reached impressive sizes. Some individuals grew up to 2.5 meters in length, making them some of the largest predators of their time. Their powerful pincers and hard exoskeletons allowed them to hunt other marine inhabitants, such as mollusks and small fish. Eurypterids were not only marine creatures, but also the first arthropods to venture onto land. Fossil remains indicate that they could navigate shallow waters and even land, marking a significant step in the evolution of terrestrial animals. These sea scorpions inhabited coastal waters, where their large size and exceptional hunting skills placed them at the top of the food chain. They appeared menacing, with long dorsal shields and numerous legs, enabling them to move swiftly both in water and on land. Eurypterids left a rich fossil record, with their remains found on different continents, including Europe and North America. The most famous finds come from the depths of Michigan, where well-preserved specimens dating back to the Silurian period were discovered. These finds allow scientists to study the lifestyle of Eurypterids and their role in ancient ecosystems more precisely. Their unique anatomy, including complex eyes and adaptive limbs, made them successful predators in the ancient ocean. Eurypterids played a key role in the ecosystems of their time, participating in complex food chains where they interacted with various marine forms of life. They were predecessors of modern spiders and crabs, demonstrating the remarkable diversity of life that existed at that time. Despite their extinct nature, they left a significant mark on the history of biology and evolution, providing valuable information about how life could adapt to changing conditions on Earth. Research continues, and new discoveries continue to amaze scientists, revealing more secrets about these ancient marine predators. It will be interesting to learn that the first animals to conquer land were not vertebrates, but arthropods, the size of a coin. During the Silurian period, around 400 million years ago, small crustaceans like chilonomids, with long legs and hard exoskeletons, began to appear on the shores of the primary water bodies. These creatures, despite their modest size, became pioneers of terrestrial life, with their external coverings evolving to withstand dehydration. Waterproof coverings made of chitin protected them from water loss, which was critically important in conditions where access to water became limited. At this time, tracheae also developed, allowing arthropods to breathe air rather than relying solely on dissolved oxygen in water. Such adaptations made them capable of life on land, opening new horizons for evolution. In the Devonian period, approximately 390 million years ago, some species, such as proterozoid arachnids, became even more diverse. They inhabited the coastal zone among decaying plants, allowing them to feed on organic remains. This was the time when the first green moss began to cover the earth, creating ideal conditions for life. Arthropods like early millipedes moved through moist areas, tearing vegetation and absorbing nutrients from decaying matter. These tiny creatures, crawling over earthen slopes, became key to the further evolution of terrestrial ecosystems. With each new generation, they became more specialized, and their body structure adapted to life in conditions where humidity and temperature could vary greatly. The discovery of new habitats became possible because their chitinous exoskeletons and tracheae allowed them to survive in harsh conditions. Complex respiratory systems enabled them to actively move across land, where they not only found food but also shelter from predators. Observing these first terrestrial inhabitants, one can imagine them sliding over moist soil, leaving tracks that would later become part of the history of our planet. Ultimately, these simple but resilient organisms paved the way for more complex forms of life that followed, changing the face of Earth over millions of years. It is important to note that during this time, significant changes were occurring in the atmosphere related to the increase in oxygen, which facilitated further development of terrestrial fauna and flora. Arthropods became the founders of ecosystems that eventually led to the appearance of the first vertebrate creatures on land. In a peculiar way, the first creatures to emerge onto land were neither plants nor animals in the way we understand them today. These pioneers were fungi, lichens, and microorganisms, which laid the foundation for life on Earth. Fungi such as Rhizopus and Penicillium began to colonize rocky surfaces and weather rocks, releasing acids that broke down minerals and contributed to the formation of the first primitive soil. Lichens, which are symbiotic combinations of fungi and algae, also played a crucial role in this process. They formed dense coverings on bare rocks, protecting their algae from ultraviolet radiation and providing them with necessary nutrients. For instance, lichens of the Cladonia and Usnea genera were among the first organisms to colonize the lifeless surfaces, creating conditions for water retention and carbon dioxide. These small but powerful organisms contributed to the weathering and decomposition of rocks, turning them into smaller particles that eventually combined to form primary soils. This process was slow, spanning several million years, but it was inevitable. Microorganisms such as cyanobacteria also played their part, producing oxygen and fixing nitrogen, making the atmosphere more suitable for life. These tiny organisms, with their remarkable ability to photosynthesize, created conditions in which future terrestrial plants could develop. By the end of the Devonian period, around 360 million years ago, more complex ecosystems began to appear on Earth, prepared by these humble yet indispensable inhabitants of the land. Fungi and lichens, slowly but surely, colonized new territories, creating soil necessary for the life of more complex organisms. They established symbiotic relationships that would later form the basis for the interaction between plants and animals. In this unique colonization process, there were no dramatic events or sudden changes, only a slow and steady transformation of dead rocks into fertile lands, where forests and fields would later flourish. This process is fundamental to understanding the evolution of life on the planet, as fungi and microorganisms were the ones who paved the way for future forms of life. For example, lichens that colonized the cliffs of modern-day Scotland and Scandinavia created conditions for the formation of soil that would later become home to the first terrestrial plants. These organisms, despite their simplicity, provided the foundation for complex ecosystems that we observe today and became key players in reshaping the appearance of our planet. Despite appearances, the climate of Earth in the Paleozoic era was incredibly variable, ranging from ice ages to greenhouse effects. During the Ordovician period, which lasted around 400 million years ago, the climate experienced one of the most significant ice ages, known as the Ordovician glaciation. Around 440 million years ago, the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere dropped sharply, leading to a sudden cooling and the formation of ice on the southern continent of Gondwana. These glaciers not only covered vast areas, but also altered ecosystems, causing mass migrations of species and contributing to the extinction of many marine organisms, such as trilobites and brachiopods. By the end of the Ordovician, around 85% of marine species had disappeared, marking one of the first major biotic catastrophes on the planet. Soon after, during the Silurian period, temperatures began to slowly rise, and carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere started to increase again, leading to a warmer climate and the flourishing of flora, including the first land plants. However, the true climatic drama unfolded during the Carboniferous period, which began around 360 million years ago. This period witnessed a significant greenhouse effect, caused by the abundance of vegetation that actively absorbed carbon dioxide and released oxygen. As a result, the average temperature of the planet rose, creating conditions for the formation of extensive tropical forests that became home to a diverse range of organisms, including the ancestors of modern amphibians and reptiles. At this time, the level of oxygen in the atmosphere reached more than 30%, facilitating the growth of large insects such as the Meganeura, whose wingspan exceeded 30 centimeters. However, such high temperatures and humidity could not last forever. By the end of the Carboniferous period, the climate became unstable, transitioning to more arid conditions. With the transition to the Permian period, around 270 million years ago, the planet experienced another significant change. The Permian desiccation, as it is known, was characterized by a sharp decrease in humidity and a significant increase in temperature. This period saw the reduction of forests and the expansion of desert areas, leading to the extinction of many species. The level of carbon dioxide reached critical levels, contributing to the emergence of high temperatures exceeding 30 degrees Celsius in some regions. This change in climate had a devastating impact on ecosystems, and by the end of the Permian period, around 250 million years ago, one of the most massive extinctions in Earth's history occurred, with around 97% of all species disappearing. These climate fluctuations not only shaped the biosphere, but also served as the basis for evolutionary changes that determined the appearance of life on Earth in subsequent eras. The climatic cycles of the Paleozoic era acted as catalysts for the diversification of life, creating conditions for further evolutionary changes and adaptations that we can observe today. On first glance, it may seem that evolution is a gradual, smooth process, but the Paleozoic era demonstrates the opposite. This period, spanning more than 300 million years, exhibits a discontinuous pattern of life development on Earth. Long periods of stability, during which species existed in relative uniformity, were interrupted by sudden bursts of speciation. For instance, during the Devonian period, which lasted from 490 to 362 million years ago, there was a significant increase in the diversity of marine organisms, including the first vertebrates and primitive amphibians. At this time, conditions favored the rapid development of new life forms, such as the rise in atmospheric oxygen levels and the diversity of ecosystems. However, these bursts of progress were not long-lasting. Mass extinctions, such as the well-known Permian extinction, which occurred around 250 million years ago, wiped out approximately 90% of all species, including trilobites and many marine creatures. The causes of this catastrophic event remain a subject of debate among scientists, but factors such as abrupt climate changes, volcanic activity, and even asteroid impacts are mentioned. These catastrophes created conditions for a new wave of evolutionary leaps, during which surviving species adapted to the altered environment. Plate tectonics also played a significant role in shaping ecosystems. Continents moved, creating new oceans and mountain ranges, which influenced climatic conditions and the migration of species. Paleozoic evolution was not just a series of changes, but a complex and unpredictable game, where life constantly adapted to changing environmental conditions. During this time, the first terrestrial plants, such as mosses and ferns, appeared, altering ecosystems and creating new niches for animals. Around 400 million years ago, during the Silurian period, the first terrestrial animals began to appear on land, simple forms like ancient spiders and insects. With each new stage of life on the planet, whether it was an explosion of new species or mass extinctions, there were incredible changes that shaped the Earth and its ecosystems. These events laid the foundation for the further development of life, including the appearance of dinosaurs and mammals in the Mesozoic era. Each step of evolution in the Paleozoic was not only a result of internal changes, but also a response to external challenges that sometimes led to global transformations. As a result, the Paleozoic era became the stage where life, despite all the trials, found ways to survive and thrive, creating unique biodiversity that we can observe in fossil remains. For example, the famous fossil remains of dinosaurs and other creatures found in the Bedford Formation in England give us an idea of how various species survived and adapted to changing conditions. This indicates that the Paleozoic was not just a period, but a true theater of evolutionary experiments, where on each stage, dramas of life and death unfolded, challenging the previous notion of linear evolution. Contrary to popular belief, the first forests on Earth had nothing in common with modern forests and more closely resembled alien landscapes. During the Devonian period, which lasted approximately from 410 to 355 million years ago, the first terrestrial forests began to appear on the planet, with Archaeopteryx being their primary inhabitants. These trees, reaching heights of up to 30 meters, had a very unusual appearance. They did not have true leaves. Instead, their branches were covered with narrow, long, and often hard structures that performed a photosynthesizing function, but looked nothing like the familiar leaves we know today. Archaeopteryx were the predecessors of modern plants and occupied a special place in the ecosystems of their time. Their trunks were massive and often branched at a height of several meters, forming columns that rose high into the air. This created a unique atmosphere in the Devonian forests, where finally trees cast shadows and a soft twilight fell on the ground, facilitating the development of other forms of life. These forests were not only the first examples of woody vegetation, but also the places where new ecosystems were born, which foreshadowed the further evolution of flora and fauna. Such forests, filled with Archaeopteryx, created a completely unique landscape where tall trunks and sparse but massive roots that delved deep into the soil dominated. This was a world of unusual forms of life, where on the ground, complex ecosystems with numerous interconnections between organisms began to form. In this primeval forest, filled with life but also wild and unfamiliar, the conditions for the appearance of the first terrestrial animals began to take shape. Fossils of Archaeopteryx show that these trees could reproduce both by spores and by seeds, which was revolutionary for their time. This allowed them to occupy new ecosystems and adapt to changing conditions on Earth. Archaeopteryx are part of a group that is considered the predecessors of seed plants and the direct ancestors of modern coniferous trees. Findings dating back to around 355 million years ago show that Archaeopteryx could reach maturity in just a few decades, allowing them to quickly fill free niches in the ecosystem. The forests of the Devonian period were true experiments of nature, where elements that later became familiar in modern ecosystems were combined. In these ancient forests, not only trees but also new forms of life, such as the first insects, began to inhabit their shade. These forests played a key role in shaping the Earth's atmosphere as they began to actively absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen, which later became the basis for life on the planet. The formation of these forests was a significant step in the evolution of the biosphere and gave a push to the further development of complex ecosystems. Archaeopteryx, with their unique appearance and dominant role in the Devonian forests, became a symbol of the transition from aquatic to terrestrial life, which occurred thanks to their unique ability to adapt to terrestrial conditions and develop new reproductive mechanisms. Imagine a seabed carpeted with living creatures resembling flowers, but these are not plants, they are animals. Sea lilies, belonging to the class of echinoderms, have existed on Earth for over 500 million years, from the Cambrian period to the present day. These remarkable creatures, resembling flowers, were attached to the seabed by a stem that served as an anchor. Their body consisted of a cup-shaped central disc with numerous tentacles surrounding it, forming a sort of crown. The length of the tentacles could reach several tens of centimeters, allowing sea lilies to effectively filter plankton and other small food particles from the water. They used their thin tentacles, covered with microscopic hairs, to catch plankton carried by underwater currents. Sea lilies inhabited dark, cold ocean waters, forming picturesque colonies that swayed with the rhythm of sea waves. Their diversity was astonishing. Over 300 species are known, varying in shape and color, from bright red to delicate blue. Over time, they adapted to various environmental conditions, and some species even managed to survive at great depths where water pressure reached critical levels. Initially, sea lilies were widespread in warm tropical waters, but their range expanded over time. These creatures not only filtered water, but also served as an important food source for many marine inhabitants, including fish and other invertebrates. Among the echinoderms of the Paleozoic era, one can also distinguish more primitive forms, such as brachiopods and sea urchins. Brachiopods, resembling bivalve mollusks, had two shells that closed to protect the soft tissues inside. They could be found on the seabed, where they also filtered food. These organisms significantly influenced the ecosystem of the time, providing diversity in marine life. Sea urchins, on the other hand, had spiky, needle-like shells and could freely move across the ocean floor, feeding on algae and other small creatures. The abundance of sea lilies and other echinoderms in the Paleozoic era testifies to the high level of biological diversity that existed at that time. Their fossilized remains, found in layers of sedimentary rocks, show that sea lilies could reach impressive sizes. Some species had a diameter of up to 1 meter. These findings help scientists reconstruct ancient ecosystems and understand how marine conditions have changed over millions of years. In particular, research on fossils found in the Calder Formation in Canada has shown that sea lilies were an important part of the ecosystem, acting as both predators and prey. Thus, sea lilies and other echinoderms not only shaped ancient marine landscapes, but also had a significant impact on the ecosystems of their time. Their existence formed the basis for many subsequent forms of life, leaving a lasting mark on the history of our planet. Importantly, it is thanks to these creatures that we can better understand the development of marine ecosystems and their evolution over billions of years. Scientific research using modern technologies, such as X-ray tomography, allows for detailed study of the internal structure of fossils, opening new horizons in understanding life on Earth during the Paleozoic era. Try to imagine a world where birds do not sing in the sky, grasshoppers do not chirp in the grass, and bees do not buzz in the air. This is the early Paleozoic era, about 400 million years ago, when the land remained almost silent and the sounds of life were but a dream. At that time, continents like Gondwana and Laurussia were vast and desolate landscapes where silence reigned. Only the rustling of wind across rocky surfaces and the babbling of water in rivers added a touch of life to this silent, lifeless scene. The atmosphere lacked the familiar soundscape we hear today. No chirping, no buzzing, no rustling. Primitive plants like xylophytes and mosses were just beginning to colonize the land, while animals remained in the water, hiding from the bright sun beneath the surface of bodies of water. Around 400 million years ago, primitive fish swam in the oceans, but on land, there were no vertebrates that could disrupt this peaceful silence. The atmosphere was mostly composed of carbon dioxide and nitrogen, and even the sounds of gusty wind seemed more oppressive than they do today, when they are interwoven with the melodies of life. The expanses of ancient landscapes were devoid of animal sound signals that now fill our forests and fields. These were silent continents, where life was just beginning to spread its wings. Plants pushed through the soil, but did not produce the sounds we would now consider familiar. Compare this with the modern world, filled with sounds. In cities, cars hum, in forests, birds sing, and in fields, bees buzz. The early Paleozoic era was a time when the sounds of nature had not yet fully entered their symphonic orchestra, but were just beginning their slow, steady development. Nature was in a state of expectation, waiting for life to finally emerge onto the land and fill this world with the sounds we know and love. During this period, when the earth was devoid of the sounds of life, only the simplest forms of life, such as single-celled organisms and algae, were developing. They may not have even realized the changes that would occur millions of years later. Nature was in expectation, and continents remained silent, created only to one day become home to countless living beings. This was an era when life was just beginning to awaken, and the symphony of sound had not yet been composed. In this time, even silence had its nuances. Each ripple of water could seem majestic, and each gust of wind, magical. In this silent world, it was easy to imagine that we were on another planet where the sounds of life had not yet developed. The silence of early Paleozoic land could seem alien, if not for the majestic mountains and rivers that shaped the landscape. While life had not yet begun its journey on land, continents remained silent witnesses to what was to come. Every millimeter of this land was ready to soon be filled with sounds and movements that would change it forever. Time passed, and with it came the realization that silence would not last forever. The first steps of animals onto land would soon change this picture, but for now, continents remained desolate, silent, and ready for change. In this time, when life had not yet filled the world with sounds, silence remained the only constant companion on this yet uncharted land. The fascinating mystery lies in the fact that around 370 million years ago, Earth experienced a catastrophe that wiped out almost all life in the oceans. This event, known as the Devonian Extinction, was one of the most significant crises in the history of our planet. During the last Devonian period, which lasted from approximately 420 to 306 million years ago, there were several major changes in ecosystems. What caused this cataclysm? There are several hypotheses that attempt to explain the causes of the Devonian extinction. One of the most widely accepted theories suggests that a meteorite impact could have caused abrupt changes in climate and ecosystems. Another hypothesis proposes that intense volcanism, accompanied by the formation of large basaltic plateaus, such as the Siberian traps, could have led to the release of enormous amounts of carbon dioxide, altering the chemical composition of the oceans and causing global warming. The third hypothesis concerns ocean anoxia, oxygen depletion in the waters, which could have occurred due to overheating of the oceans and excessive blooms of algae caused by increased nutrient content in the water. As a result of the Devonian extinction, according to different estimates, between 50 to 90% of all marine species perished. Coral reefs, which were the primary building blocks of reefs at the time, and fish such as stigomodonts and many other species that could not adapt to the changing conditions, were particularly hard hit. During this dramatic time, evolution could have taken a completely different path, as many groups of organisms, such as early amphibians and some types of cartilaginous fish, were on the brink of extinction. Despite all these catastrophic changes, some species managed to survive and adapt to the new conditions, leading to the restoration and evolution of life on the planet in new directions over the following millions of years. At this time, the first forests began to form on Earth, which later led to the emergence of new ecosystems. The Devonian extinction left deep traces, and its consequences were felt long after the catastrophe ended. This period marked the beginning of many changes that determined the subsequent development of life on Earth. It is worth noting that it was during this time that the first true fish, such as sharks, began to emerge and became dominant in marine ecosystems. Transport yourself back to the time when the Earth's atmosphere was first filled with oxygen, creating conditions for the development of complex life. This event, known as the Great Oxygenation Event, occurred approximately 2.5 billion years ago, at the end of the Archean era and the beginning of the Proterozoic. The main culprits behind this change were cyanobacteria, which, through photosynthesis, began to release oxygen. As a result of this process, the level of oxygen in the atmosphere began to rise, dramatically altering its chemical composition and creating conditions for the appearance of aerobic organisms. In the early stages, photosynthesizing organisms, such as cyanobacteria, played a key role in transforming carbon dioxide and water into glucose and oxygen, allowing them not only to survive, but also to actively reproduce. At this time, the atmosphere was mainly composed of carbon dioxide, methane, and ammonia. But with the increase in oxygen concentration, significant changes began to occur in ecosystems. Approximately 1 billion years after the start of this process, the level of oxygen reached a critical mark of 21%, made possible by the activity of these microorganisms. This increase in oxygen marked the beginning of a new evolutionary stage, opening the door for the appearance of multicellular organisms. During this period, known as the Ediacaran biota, the first diverse forms of life appeared on Earth, including soft-bodied animals such as Dickinsonia, which inhabited the ocean floors. Concurrently, new metabolic pathways evolved, enabling organisms to use oxygen for energy production, which paved the way for the emergence of more complex forms of life. With the increase in oxygen in the atmosphere, the quality of life on Earth also changed. Organisms began to develop protective mechanisms against oxidative stress, facilitating their adaptation to new conditions. Ultimately, oxygen became the primary component for the formation of the ozone layer, which protects Earth from ultraviolet radiation, paving the way for life on land. The level of oxygen in the atmosphere not only altered chemical processes, but also served as a catalyst for the appearance of vertebrates, which occurred approximately 500 million years ago during the Cambrian explosion, a phenomenon where life on Earth rapidly diversified. These changes formed the basis for the development of all modern ecosystems and shaped evolutionary lines that ultimately led to the appearance of humans. The oxygen revolution did not just change the atmosphere, it created a new reality on the planet where life could develop, evolve, and adapt to various conditions. Oxygen became essential for the existence of the organisms we know today, and its level in the atmosphere continues to be critical for sustaining life on Earth. It's hard to believe, but the first vertebrates that conquered land did not have fingers and more resembled fish with legs. One of the most famous early tetrapods is Tiktaalik, which lived around 360 million years ago during the Devonian period. This remarkable organism combined features of both fish and the first land animals. Tiktaalik had lungs, allowing it to breathe air, and gills that it used underwater. Its fins gradually transformed into limbs, enabling it to move in shallow water and eventually venture onto land. These creatures inhabited coastal zones and small bodies of water, allowing them to explore new ecosystems full of opportunities. In Devonian rivers, Tiktaalik could easily maneuver, using its strong fins to stay in place or move along the bottom. It had a flat head with a powerful jaw, enabling it to hunt other small animals in the same waters. An important aspect of its anatomy were the ribs, which supported its body out of water, allowing Tiktaalik to spend more time on land. It could use its limbs to move along rocky shores and in shallow water, where other fish could not survive. Tiktaalik served as a link between aquatic and terrestrial life. Modern research shows that its limbs already had elements that later developed into true legs, allowing tetrapods to evolve into more complex forms of life. Other early tetrapods included Acanthostega and Deltapodus, which also exhibited mixed characteristics. Acanthostega, which lived around 360 million years ago, had 8 limbs and could move both in water and on land. Its fins were more developed than those of Tiktaalik, but did not have clearly formed fingers, making its movement on land clumsy. Nevertheless, Acanthostega could use its limbs for support in shallow water. Deltapodus, on the other hand, was a more specialized creature with both gills and lungs, further confirming the importance of the transitional period from aquatic to terrestrial life. These early tetrapods lived in conditions where the climate was warm and humid, and ecosystems offered a rich diversity of food. The conditions of the Devonian period facilitated the emergence of new forms of life, and tetrapods like Tiktaalik were the first steps in the conquest of land. It is important to note that it was during this period that the first plant communities began to populate the shores, creating new ecosystems and providing new food sources for these early vertebrates. The development of tetrapods and their transition to life on land was one of the most significant events in the history of animal evolution. Tiktaalik and its kin were living proof that life can adapt to new conditions, and their existence laid the foundation for the further development of vertebrates. An enigmatic phenomenon occurred at the end of the Paleozoic era. The global ocean level dropped sharply, exposing vast continental shelf territories. This process, known as the regression of the sea at the end of the Permian period, began approximately 30 million years ago and led to significant changes in marine ecosystems. As a result of this event, many marine organisms, such as corals, mollusks, and marine reptiles, found themselves in critical situations as their usual habitats were dried out. The drop in sea level created extensive lifeless plains where once thriving ecosystems flourished. For instance, coral reefs, which served as homes for numerous species, began to degrade due to the lack of necessary living conditions. Meanwhile, sediments that previously accumulated on the ocean floor now remained on the surface, forming desolate landscapes where once there were underwater meadows and rich biotopes. Consequently, organisms like brachiopods and trilobites, which depended on a stable marine environment, faced difficulties in survival. Numerous fish species also suffered from the loss of their habitats, as their spawning grounds and feeding areas were destroyed. In coastal zones, oxygen levels decreased, further stressing the remaining inhabitants. Studies indicate that such a sharp drop in sea level was caused by a multitude of factors, including tectonic processes and climatic changes that affected the distribution of oceanic water. Moreover, the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere also played a role, as it influenced climate change and, consequently, the alteration of ecosystems. Specifically, at the end of the Permian period, the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere reached nearly 1,000 parts per million, significantly increasing temperature and altering conditions for marine organisms. Thus, the regression of the sea during this historical period not only exposed continents, but also created conditions for an ecological catastrophe, the effects of which were felt for millions of years. Ultimately, as a result of these changes, more than 90% of marine species went extinct, making it one of the largest mass extinctions in Earth's history. These facts underscore not only the significance of marine ecosystems, but also their vulnerability in the face of natural disasters. In those times when the seas teemed with life, there existed a predator with eyes the size of your head. Aomalocaris was not just an ancient creature, it was a symbol of dominance in the oceans of the Cambrian period, which spanned from 538 to 500 million years ago. This giant, reaching up to 1.5 meters in length, possessed a unique body that combined elements of modern shells and insects. Its side fins allowed it to maneuver with incredible speed, making it a formidable opponent for any creature that dared to cross its path. The grasping appendages in front of its mouth were perfect for capturing prey. These appendages, similar to tentacles, could confidently grab even fast-moving animals like trilobites, which were at the peak of their prosperity at the time. The enormous compound eyes of Iomalocaris could detect even the slightest movements in the water, creating an atmosphere of primal fear among smaller creatures that encountered it in the dark depths. Their complex structure allowed it to see in low-light conditions, giving it an advantage in hunting. Iomalocaris was not just a predator, it was also a crucial part of the ecosystem, playing a role in regulating the populations of other marine inhabitants. Fossils of this predator, found in Canada and China, show that it evolved into more well-known marine monsters like the Megalodon, which would appear millions of years later. Scientists studying the remains of Iomalocaris found that its anatomy was significantly more complex than that of most of its contemporaries, indicating a high degree of adaptation to its environment and competitive struggle. This ancient predator became the prototype for many marine creatures that followed, and its influence on marine evolution is impossible to overstate. 500 million years ago, in a world where every creature was a potential victim, Iomalocaris reigned as the ruler of the depths, leaving behind only the shadows of frightened trilobites struggling to survive in this harsh and unforgiving oceanic realm. In those times when the land was almost lifeless, the first plant pioneers began cautiously to conquer the New World. During the Silurian period, which lasted approximately from 440 to 410 million years ago, the simplest forms of life began to appear on the shores of ancient seas. One of the first types of plants to venture onto land was a moss-like plant known as xylophyte. These small plants, ranging in height from several centimeters to half a meter, lacked roots like modern plants, and instead used structures called rhizoids to anchor themselves to the surface. Xylophytes depended on a moist environment, and their existence was closely tied to the availability of water, making them vulnerable to climate changes. Their primitive structure allowed them to absorb water and nutrients directly through the surface of their stems and leaves, as full-fledged roots and leaves were just beginning to form. These tiny green islands of life appeared among bare rocks and stones, creating a contrast with the silent world where only winds and waters reigned. As the transition to the early Devonian period began, which spanned from 410 to 360 million years ago, the pioneers of terrestrial flora began to actively develop. More complex multicellular plants such as primitive ferns and other simple spore-bearing plants appeared. These organisms reached heights of up to 1 meter and possessed more developed stems, allowing them to use solar energy for photosynthesis. However, like their predecessors, they continued to be dependent on moist conditions for their existence. During this time, the climate began to change gradually, and some areas became wetter, which facilitated the expansion of the range of these early land plants. The stems became more rigid and sturdy, allowing plants to compete for sunlight in conditions where they could grow. Complex ecosystems had not yet formed, and plants were unable to create a full canopy of forest. Nevertheless, their green shoots began to attract diverse fauna. Insects such as primitive dragonflies and insect ancestors began to colonize new niches, and their appearance facilitated a deeper interaction between flora and fauna. The appearance of the first land plants was a significant stage in the evolution of life on Earth, as they began to produce oxygen, which would have a huge impact on the planet's atmosphere in the future. The first land plants created not only new ecological niches, but also formed soil, which would later allow more complex forms of life to develop. During this period, the first marine algae also began to colonize shallow waters, adding diversity to the marine flora. These algae later became the basis for marine ecosystems and played a crucial role in forming the oxygen-rich atmosphere. The appearance of the first land plants and their slow but steady spread across the land was a landmark event that paved the way for the creation of more complex ecosystems and diverse forms of life. By the end of the Devonian period, which concluded around 360 million years ago, land forests began to actively form, but at the beginning of this process, the world was filled with only the first, modest representatives of flora. Imagine a world where continents collide, forming a single landmass, and mountain ranges tower to the heavens. This is not mere fantasy, but reality that occurred around 300 million years ago, when the supercontinent Pangaea was formed. This process began at the end of the Paleozoic era, as tectonic plates started moving due to convective currents in Earth's mantle. Continents such as Laurasia in the north and Gondwana in the south gradually approached each other, colliding and creating massive mountain ranges like the Appalachians in North America and the Urals in Russia. These mountains were the result of collisions between continents and complex geological processes, including the uplift and compression of Earth's crust. At this time, oceanic currents underwent significant changes. The merging of continents led to the formation of a vast internal ocean called Tethys, which separated Pangaea from other land masses. Oceanic currents, which had previously been more diverse, became more uniform, affecting the climate across the entire planet. New climatic zones emerged. The center of Pangaea became arid, while the periphery remained more humid. This process was not instantaneous. It lasted millions of years, from the Devonian period when continents began to slowly shift, to the Triassic period when Pangaea reached its maximum size. During this time, Earth's surface underwent profound changes. Volcanic activity increased, creating new geological formations and altering landscapes. For example, in the area of modern East Africa, there were strong volcanic eruptions that formed volcanic mountains like Kilimanjaro. Archaeologists and geologists, such as Dr. Eric Weiss, study the remnants of these processes and find evidence confirming the scale of changes. They analyze soil samples and fossils to understand how life adapted to these extreme conditions. The formation of Pangaea subjected flora and fauna to harsh trials, as many species could not survive the new climatic conditions, leading to a significant decrease in biological diversity on the planet. Scientific research shows that the formation of Pangaea also affected the level of oxygen in the atmosphere. The increase in land area altered ecosystems and biomes. Some plant species, such as ferns and conifers, began to dominate, while other ecosystems gradually disappeared. The process of Pangaea's disintegration began around 200 million years ago, when continents started to separate, leading to the current distribution of landmasses. The story of Pangaea's formation and disintegration is not just a geological chronicle, but a crucial stage in the evolution of life on Earth, which had a lasting impact on climate and ecosystems. Scientific research continues to delve into the study of these processes, revealing details about how Earth transformed over millions of years, leaving behind fossils and geological formations that we can observe and study today. Imagine a world where the atmosphere contained 50% more oxygen than today, allowing insects to grow to incredible sizes. During the Carboniferous period, which lasted from 360 to 300 million years ago, the oxygen level in the atmosphere reached around 30%, compared to the current level of approximately 21%. This abundance of oxygen created a unique environment for life and facilitated the rapid evolution of various organisms. For example, due to the high oxygen content, some insect species, such as the Meganeura, could reach wingspans of up to 60 centimeters, which is 3 times larger than those of modern large butterflies. Such sizes were possible due to the efficient gas exchange enabled by the high oxygen concentration, allowing these creatures to maintain active metabolism and engage in flight. The reduced air pressure also contributed to their ability to easily take to the skies. Meanwhile, in other ecosystems, small insects were developing, while in the Carboniferous forests, giant species emerged that dominated their ecosystems. These large insects served as food for the first reptiles and other predators, contributing to their evolution. The high oxygen level also affected other groups of organisms. For instance, plants like ancient ferns and horsetails could grow up to 30 meters tall, creating dense forests that became homes for numerous animals. The abundance of vegetation, in turn, facilitated the formation of coal, which became a vital resource for subsequent epochs. Thus, the Carboniferous period laid the foundation for later ecosystems, where the balance between plants and animals developed under the influence of a unique atmosphere. The existence of such giants as the Meganeura illustrates how oxygen can transform life and accelerate evolutionary processes. In this ecosystem, life was rapidly evolving, creating new niches and adaptations. The high oxygen level also contributed to the fact that many marine organisms, such as trilobites and mollusks, became larger and more diverse, increasing competition in marine ecosystems. As the atmosphere became enriched with oxygen, the biosphere became more complex and diverse. The evolutionary changes that occurred during this time became the basis for the appearance of new species and forms of life, opening the way for further biodiversity on Earth. This unique period was not just the time of giant insects, but also of multifaceted ecosystems where each organism played its role in sustaining life. The high oxygen level left its mark on Earth's history, shaping the path for future generations of organisms. The heights of ancient trees reaching 30 meters and the sizes of insects exceeding modern fauna demonstrate how significantly life on the planet changed in response to atmospheric changes. It is astonishing that the majority of animal types existing today appeared in an incredibly short period of time. This phenomenon, known as the Cambrian explosion, occurred approximately 500 million years ago at the beginning of the Cambrian period, which lasted around 30 million years. During this time, complex ecosystems began to emerge in the oceans, and as a result of a rapid increase in biodiversity, all major types of multicellular animals appeared. Paleontologists consider this time one of the most significant moments in Earth's history, when life seemed to explode into a multitude of forms and functions. According to estimates by paleontologists, around 50 new animal groups emerged during this period, including the ancestors of modern arthropods, mollusks, and chordates. The diversity of forms was truly impressive, from simple worms to the first predators like the marella, which could reach 2 meters in length and fought for survival in the dark depths of ancient seas. It is interesting to note that during this time, the first shells also appeared, providing protection for soft-bodied organisms and facilitating their spread. A significant role in this process was played by changes in the chemical composition of the oceans, increased oxygen content, and the development of photosynthesizing organisms, creating conditions for the emergence of new species. Research shows that during this time, the rate of evolution significantly increased, and many species were able to adapt to new ecological niches. This was possible because the oceans were filled with nutrients, creating favorable conditions for life. Paleontological finds, such as the famous fossils from the Burgess Shale in Canada, provide unique evidence of the diversity of life at that time. These fossils, dating back approximately 500 million years, show a wide range of organisms, many of which had complex anatomical structures and even eyes, indicating the development of visual systems. The Cambrian explosion laid the foundation for the further development of life on Earth, setting the directions of evolution that we observe today. As a result of this period, all major animal groups arose, which continue to exist and evolve to this day. Research shows that during this short period, more than 100 species emerged, leaving their mark in the geological record. It is possible that you have never considered that the most catastrophic mass extinction in Earth's history occurred long before the dinosaurs. The Permian extinction, which took place around 250 million years ago, was the largest catastrophe in the history of the biosphere. wiping out up to 96% of marine and 70% of terrestrial species. This cataclysm, known as the Great Dying, occurred over a short period, geologically speaking, in just a few million years. The primary cause of this event is believed to be volcanic activity in the region of the Siberian Traps, which are massive layers of basaltic lava formed by powerful eruptions. These eruptions released enormous volumes of carbon dioxide and sulfur gases, leading to catastrophic changes in the atmosphere and oceans. The increase in carbon dioxide levels caused a greenhouse effect, leading to a rise in global temperatures. Simultaneously, the high concentration of sulfur compounds resulted in acid rain and, consequently, anoxia in the oceans, where oxygen levels sharply declined. This created conditions in which marine life became almost impossible. As a result, we observe the collapse of ecosystems that once thrived with trilobites, ammonites, and other marine organisms. In the oceans, darkness reigned, and only a few species, such as some brachiopods and small fish, managed to survive in these conditions. On land, large reptiles and early amphibians also faced horrendous conditions. Forests that were once teeming with life transformed into dead zones, where not a single breathing creature remained. The recovery of the biosphere after such a catastrophic event took millions of years. It was only after the Permian period, in the Triassic, that ecosystems began to gradually recover, and new species began to fill the void left by the extinct ones. However, even after the recovery of the biosphere, its diversity remained low compared to what it was before the catastrophe. Ultimately, the Permian extinction served as a crucial lesson for future generations, demonstrating how fragile life on our planet is. It is important to remember that even today, geological traces of this event remain on Earth, such as layers with fossilized remains that confirm the scale of the loss of species. Imagine for a moment an ocean teeming with creatures resembling squids, but with a shell spiraled like a snail. These enigmatic beings, known as nautiloids and ammonites, inhabited the waters that once covered Earth millions of years ago during the Paleozoic era. Nautiloids, such as Nautilus pompilius, have a characteristic spiral shell divided into chambers that help them regulate buoyancy. The shell can reach up to 20 centimeters in diameter and is adorned with vibrant patterns, making them not only effective predators, but also true works of art in nature. These creatures use jet propulsion for movement, expelling water from their bodies through specialized siphons, allowing them to maneuver quickly in search of food. Their predatory lifestyle was based on catching small fish and crustaceans, which they tracked with their sensitive tentacles. Ammonites, such as ammonites, were close relatives of nautiloids, but had a more complex and varied shell form, ranging from spiral to disc-shaped. They could reach up to 4 meters in diameter, and their shells were decorated with intricate patterns and ribs, making them easily recognizable among other marine inhabitants. These mollusks also used jet propulsion and were among the most advanced predators of their time, hunting fish, shrimp, and even other cephalopods. Unlike nautiloids, ammonites had a shorter lifespan and evolved rapidly, allowing them to occupy diverse ecosystems. Both of these organisms played a significant role in marine ecosystems, and their fossilized remains found in various geological layers are evidence of their prosperity during the Mesozoic era. Studies show that ammonites went extinct around 70 million years ago, likely due to a mass extinction caused by an asteroid impact, while nautiloids, despite their ancient lineage, have survived to the present day. Modern nautiloids are living fossils, retaining many traits of their ancestors, making them unique representatives of marine fauna. The structure of their shells and their way of life allow them to remain successful hunters even in today's oceans, where competition for food remains high. While ammonites disappeared, nautiloids continue to exist as elegant predators, highlighting their adaptability and resilience. Their ability to regenerate and adapt to changes in their environment makes them an interesting subject for study. Scientists like Dr. James M. Campbell investigate their behavior and ecological roles, emphasizing that even in the face of changing climates, nautiloids demonstrate remarkable resilience. These extraordinary creatures continue to inspire researchers and nature enthusiasts worldwide with their unique structure and history. Their fossils can be found in various places, including famous geological formations, such as the renowned Kimberley layers in Australia, where fossils dating back more than 30 million years have been preserved. Once upon a time, a supercontinent known as Gondwana existed on Earth, encompassing nearly all of the planet's landmass in a single entity. This supercontinent began to form more than 400 million years ago during the Paleozoic era and persisted until the end of the Mesozoic era, when it began to fracture into separate continents. Gondwana included modern-day Africa, South America, Australia, Antarctica, and the Indian subcontinent, reaching colossal proportions. Around the Paleozoic period, Gondwana was located in the southern hemisphere, with a significant portion of its territory close to the equator, creating unique climatic conditions. This positioning facilitated the formation of vast tropical forests and wet ecosystems, which were home to numerous species, including the ancestors of modern amphibians, reptiles, and the first mammals. The extensive coastal zones of Gondwana were washed by warm seas, fostering the development of rich marine life, including coral reefs and diverse fish species. Meanwhile, the interior regions of the continent featured a variety of landscapes, from high mountains to vast plains and deserts. Paleontological finds, such as the fossilized remains of ancient reptiles and vegetation, confirm that Gondwana was not only the largest continent of its time, but also a significant center of biological diversity. The study of these fossils reveals how ecosystems evolved over millions of years in response to climatic fluctuations. Gondwana also played a crucial role in shaping the modern climate of Earth, as its rifts and movements influenced ocean currents and atmospheric conditions. For instance, when Gondwana began to break apart around 100 million years ago, this led to changes in marine currents, affecting the global climate. The separation of the continents resulted in changes in the distribution of biomes, leading to the isolation of some species and their subsequent evolution. Importantly, the fragmentation of Gondwana gave rise to the modern continents we know today. It is fascinating that even now, scientists continue to discover evidence of Gondwana's existence, such as similar geological formations on various continents that point to their shared historical trajectory. Gondwana left behind not only geological traces, but also a rich legacy that is studied by scientists worldwide. For example, in the early 2000s, fossilized trees were found in Antarctica, dating back around 100 million years, indicating that during that time, the continent was covered with dense forests.